Well, last night you may have been one of the thousands of people who tuned into our live stream covering the Quebec provincial election. I'm very glad we did. It wasn't particularly long and it wasn't particularly intricate. I was here in our Rebel World headquarters, and our main lady in Quebec, Alexa Lavoie, was at the headquarters of the Quebec Conservative Party led by Eric Duhem. And we were on in the air for a few nights, but it was very quick that we saw the results were going to be a majority, a re-elected majority for the incumbent party, the Coalition Avenir Quebec, led by Francois Legault, and our little beloved Quebec Conservative Party, which was only revived a couple of years ago by Eric Duhem. Although it did well in the polls, it managed to punch through nowhere. It actually got no seats. It was shut out. A function of our first past the post system. Here's a little chart courtesy of the Montreal Gazette that I think shows the story very well. Francois Legault's CAQ party, as it's called, got 41% of the vote. And no doubt about it, that's a win when there are five parties afoot. But with 41% of the vote, they actually got 72% of the seats. And the Quebec Liberal Party, very similar, 14.4% of the vote, and got 16.8% of the seats, not too far off the same proportion. But look at how the other opposition parties fared. The hard left-wing Quebec Solidaire got 15% of the vote, but only 9% of the seats. The Parti Québécois, once a dominant force there, the separatist party of René Lévesque, it got almost the same, 14.6% of the vote, but only 2.4% of the seats. And the party that I had high hopes for, the Parti Conservateur de Quebec, they had 13% of the vote and no seats. Eric Duhem, in a series of tweets today, saying he was not despondent. He was pleased with the work they had accomplished and he would get right back at it. Obviously, he's disappointed he had no seats. I was proud that we had our live stream last night and Alexa was there on location. It's been a busy political season. Pierre Poilievre, of course, took up a lot of the media attention. He's well known in Ottawa and he plans to take on Justin Trudeau. Even the fact that he's the new leader was interesting in that it happened because of the trucker convoy. Aaron O'Toole, his predecessor, refused to meet with the truckers and tried to ban his MPs from doing so. Well, they decided to replace the leader, not their principals. And so Pierre Poilievre, not only is he a strong conservative communicator who's going to shake things up, but the very fact that he was leader itself was the subject of some conflict. Before that, I think a lot of the oxygen in the political room was that of the lockdowns. If you think about it, for 2 years, this country has been in a terrible crisis, an economic crisis, a civil liberties crisis, a judicial crisis, a medical crisis, so many crises that we're only now emerging from and seeing the true damage done. The damage was not done by the virus. It was done by politicians using the virus as an excuse. So between the Quebec election, Doug Ford's re-election, Pierre Poilievre's election, and the lockdowns, there's been a lot of focus other than on the province of Alberta, which is not normal. Alberta really has an oversized place in the national discussion because it's economically so strong. It's oil and gas and prairie freedom. It's always been at odds with the Ottawa mentality. Even the Constitution is tilted against it. There was Western separatism afoot until Preston Manning tried to harness it and turn it into the Reform Party. Stephen Harper tamped down both Western separatism and Quebec separatism and gave the country 9 years of peace. Trudeau has ripped that up and is dividing us not only on geographic and ethnic and racial and gender lines, but also on vaxxed and unvaxxed. It's terrible. But I think that in 2 days from now, when the Alberta United Conservative Party, the UCP as it's called, chooses its next leader, Alberta, which has been in the background for 2 years, I think will again come to the foreground. I mean, Doug Ford, everyone knows him. Francois Legault, everyone knows him. Really, we've been stuck in the status quo for 2 years, but Danielle Smith, who is looking likely to win the UCP leadership, I believe that she will make Alberta the lightning rod of Confederation yet again. She has proposed a Sovereignty Act. The details are not yet written, but it would allow Alberta to opt out of federal decisions it simply doesn't like. That sounds chaotic or outrageous, but of course provinces do that all the time. Even Justin Trudeau does it. For many years, for example, police simply would not enforce laws against the possession of marijuana. It's just a simple example of politicians choosing not to enforce certain laws. What Danielle Smith proposes, and we've talked about this before, is that Alberta behave a little bit more like Quebec, taking up its full sovereign jurisdiction under Section 92 of the Constitution. Section 92 of the Constitution, Section 91 being the federal powers and 92 being the provincial powers. For example, having its own provincial police force, like Quebec does, its own pension plan, like Quebec does, etc. Maybe its own immigration policy. I think that Danielle Smith has been under the radar of the national media for the reasons I said. There were other things going on in more important parts of the country like Ontario and Quebec. But now that those matters are all settled, and now that the choice of the federal Conservatives is chosen to take on Justin Trudeau, I think the Ottawa Press Gallery is going to be bored and satisfied enough that they will turn their attention to Danielle Smith. And I think they're about to declare war on Alberta. Alberta oil and gas and farms and guns and pipelines, these are all the things that Ottawa politicians like to pick on to the delight of Eastern Canadian voters. But if Danielle Smith does indeed become the leader of the party and the de facto premier, she won't have a seat in the legislature just yet. What you just saw was an excerpt from my nightly show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every weekday I do a monologue. Usually it's about half an hour. Then I interview an interesting guest, and then we read my hate mail or my fan mail, whichever is more fun. It's only available behind a paywall, though. That's how we pay our bills here at Rebel News. We don't take a dime from Justin Trudeau. But the good news is it's only $8 a month, about half the price of Netflix. And in addition to my nightly show, you also get weekly shows from 4 other friends here at Rebel News. So you're getting 36 shows a month just for $8. I think it's worth it. And even if you're not quite sure, do it anyways, because we rely on viewers like you to keep us free and independent. I promise you I'll never take a dime from Trudeau. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com and click subscribe. Thanks.